What if being good is not a shield, but a target? What if virtue does not protect you, but marks you for punishment? This is the question that Justine forces into the listener's mind, slowly, relentlessly, without mercy. This is not a story designed to excite. It is a story designed to corrode. It does not ask you to enjoy cruelty. It asks you to watch it win again and again, with calm logic and unsettling confidence. In this world, good intentions do not lead to safety. They lead to exposure. They make you visible. They make you vulnerable. Justine believes in virtue with a kind of desperate purity. She believes that if she does the right thing, the world will eventually respond in kind. That belief is the real experiment of the book. And from the very beginning, the experiment fails. What follows is not chaos, but pattern. Not madness, but philosophy. Evil here is not impulsive. It is articulate. It explains itself. It justifies itself. And worst of all, it sounds reasonable. This is why the book was feared, not because it shocked the senses, but because it poisoned the moral reflex. It whispers a forbidden idea. What if morality is not rewarded? What if cruelty is not an exception, but a strategy? What if the world is not broken, but functioning exactly as it should? This is not a horror story. There are no monsters hiding in the dark. There is only a system that smiles politely while it destroys the innocent and calls that process natural.
Justine begins with faith. Not religious faith alone, but faith in structure. Faith that the universe keeps score, that suffering and goodness exist in balance, that if you endure long enough, justice will eventually notice you. She is not naive. She is committed. And that is more dangerous. This book does not punish ignorance. It punishes conviction. Justine chooses virtue not once, but repeatedly, even when every signal around her warns her to stop. She believes morality is a language the world understands. She believes that refusal to compromise is strength. What the story does, quietly and methodically, is strip that belief of all protection. Every choice she makes according to moral law does not save her. It isolates her. It places her at the mercy of those who understand something she does not. That the world does not reward goodness. It exploits it. The more she insists on being virtuous, the more predictable she becomes. And predictability is power, just not for her. For those who wish to use her, control her, discard her, virtue becomes leverage. This is the most unsettling move the book makes. It does not argue that goodness is fake. It argues that goodness is inefficient. In a world driven by appetite, authority, and domination, the person who refuses to adapt becomes raw material. Justine is not destroyed by chance. She is destroyed by logic. A logic that says mercy is weakness, that restraint is foolish, that those who follow rules will always lose to those who write them. This is why the cruelty feels cold rather than chaotic. It follows a thesis. If the universe has no moral spine, then the only winning move is to abandon virtue entirely. And as this idea takes shape, the listener begins to feel the true danger of the book, because it does not shout this conclusion. It demonstrates it patiently, through consequence after consequence, until morality itself begins to feel like a liability rather than a refuge.
The world responds to Justine's virtue not with correction, but with confirmation. Each time she believes that endurance will be rewarded, The response grows colder, more precise, almost instructional. It is as if the world is teaching her a lesson she refuses to learn. This is not random suffering. It is patterned. It follows a rule. That rule is simple. The good are useful because they hesitate. They doubt themselves. They wait for permission to act. And while they wait, others move. The book constructs a reality where power recognizes virtue instantly, not as something to respect, but as something to harvest. Justine's goodness becomes a signal flare. It tells others that she will not strike first, that she will not lie, that she will not protect herself at the cost of others. And so she is selected, again and again, not because she is unlucky, but because she is reliable. This is where the story becomes unbearable in a quiet way, because it refuses to let the listener believe in exception. After each fall, there is a pause, a moment where Justine believes this was the last test, that surely now the balance will correct itself. That moment never comes. The world does not apologize. The world does not adjust. Its answer is repetition, and repetition is persuasion. What begins as moral shock slowly transforms into moral erosion. The listener begins to feel it too, that creeping question that the book wants you to feel but not admit. How long would you keep choosing virtue if it only ever made things worse? How long before goodness starts to feel less like courage and more like self-destruction? The cruelty here is not loud. It is instructional. It teaches by outcome. It shows that systems do not need to hate goodness to destroy it. They only need to find it inconvenient. And in this world, virtue is always inconvenient. This is the moment where the book reveals its true ambition. It is not satisfied with showing suffering. It wants to explain it. Cruelty in this story is not framed as madness or excess. It is framed as clarity. Those who cause harm do not see themselves as villains. They see themselves as realists. They speak in arguments, not threats. They present cruelty as alignment with nature, with power, with truth. They argue that morality is a story invented by the weak to survive a world that does not care. They claim that restraint is artificial, that compassion is sentimental noise, and that pleasure and domination are the only honest currencies left. This is what makes the book dangerous. The cruelty is articulate. It offers reasons. It builds a worldview where virtue is not just ineffective, but irrational. In this philosophy, evil does not feel like rebellion. It feels like graduation. It is what happens when you stop lying to yourself about how the world works. And the listener is forced into an uncomfortable position, because the book never explicitly tells you to agree. It simply removes every comforting alternative. It shows you a universe where goodness leads only to pain, and then asks you to keep believing anyway. That tension is the core of the work. The cruelty is not there to shock the senses. It is there to humiliate the idea of moral reward. And by doing so, it commits its deepest offense. It turns ethics into a losing strategy. And once that idea takes root, it does not stay inside the book. It follows the listener out, because the question it leaves behind is not literary. It is personal. If virtue guarantees nothing, and cruelty guarantees results, what exactly are we choosing when we choose to be good?
By this point, the story no longer feels like a series of events. It feels like a proof. The book has constructed a closed system, and within that system, evil does not merely succeed, it thrives. It adapts, it consolidates, it learns. Justine's suffering is not treated as tragedy, but as data. Every outcome reinforces the same conclusion, that power rewards alignment, not morality. That those who abandon restraint gain leverage over those who cling to it. In this world, evil does not need to hide, because it is never punished for existing. It is punished only when it fails. And failure is rare, because evil here understands the rules better. It does not wait for fairness. It does not appeal to justice. It takes, and the system responds by making room for it. This is what makes the universe of the book feel so complete and so suffocating. There is no outside. There is no moral referee waiting to intervene. There is only momentum. The listener begins to realize that the true horror is not what happens to Justine, but how predictable it all becomes. Once you accept the premise, once you see the pattern, you can anticipate the outcome before it arrives. And anticipation is worse than shock, because it kills hope early. The book forces you to watch goodness walk toward harm with full knowledge and no protection. And slowly, a terrible clarity settles in. This world does not punish cruelty because cruelty aligns with its mechanics. It punishes virtue because virtue interrupts efficiency. In such a system, evil does not feel transgressive. It feels optimal. And the most unsettling realization is this: the world does not need to be cruel to make cruelty win. It only needs to be indifferent.
When the story ends, it does not offer resolution. It leaves a residue, a question that clings to the listener long after the narrative stops speaking. If goodness leads to suffering and cruelty leads to power, then what is virtue for? Is it strategy? Is it delusion? Or is it something else entirely? The book never answers this, because answering it would soften the experiment. Instead, it leaves you alone with the discomfort. It forces you to confront the possibility that morality is not a transaction, that it does not exist to protect you or reward you, but to define you in a world that may never care. This is why the book endured long after the scandals faded. It is not remembered because it was forbidden. It is remembered because it was honest in a way people found unbearable. It stripped morality of its guarantees and asked whether anyone would still choose it without reward. That question is still alive, because every system that prioritizes results over principles quietly echoes the same logic. And every time goodness fails publicly, that logic feels persuasive again. This is not a book that tells you to abandon virtue. It is more dangerous than that. It asks whether you would keep it, even if it cost you everything. And that is why the cruelty in this story is philosophical rather than sensational. It does not aim to excite. It aims to expose. And once you see what it exposes, you cannot unsee it. Because the most disturbing possibility it leaves behind is not that evil wins, but that goodness was never meant to win at all.